Okay, we're moving on to the next section, and that is going to be known as Hiberno-Saxon art, and it's also known as Insular art. And this is basically the art of England and Ireland. So Hibernia is the ancient Latin name for Ireland, and Saxon refers to England at this time. So based on this time frame, we see a lot of migrations coming from different areas of northern Europe. So we've got now the Saxons, the Angles, the Jutes, and and they're all fleeing. They're all coming into England. This is Ireland right here. This is Scotland, and both Scotland and England. I'm sorry, Ireland, England, and Scotland have a mix of Celtic, Celtic, art history that is embedded in their culture. But what we see during this time period is the combination of Celtic, Roman, Germanic, and Norse cultures. So we are seeing similarities in style, and it makes it a little bit difficult to tell the difference between them individually because there's so much cross cultural exchange that the art looks quite similar. So the single term we use for this region during this period is called Hiberno-Saxon. And although there were migratory tribes, there was also a strong Christian tradition and monasteries that thrived in these regions. And although they were cut off from Rome, you could see where the former Roman Empire was. The Celtic Christians will develop their own liturgical practices, their own calendar, and a distinctive artistic tradition. The Roman Christian Church eventually triumphs and brings British Christians under their authority in the 7th century, but local traditions continue in the art. So, some general overview of religious art in this period. Early Christians in this region followed the commandment that God gave to Moses that forbade any graven image or likeness of anything that is above heaven. So, the I shall not take, false gods before the real God. And so they kind of took that and similar to the Byzantines and didn't necessarily focus on the specific likenesses because they felt like it would be false idols. So the problem is that many of the early Christians had been converted pagans, and they were accustomed to having religious images to worship. So the use of images in religious rituals was difficult to abandon because of this combination. So we see a diverse take on in different areas on what is okay for religious art, and the style of art is in its own way trying to be compatible with the theology in the region. So Christian art was influenced by illusionary qualities of classical art, but it definitely started to move away from naturalistic representation and towards abstraction. Artists began to abandon classical artistic conventions like shading, modeling, and perspective because that made art appear real and therefore it could become a false idol. Instead, artists will favor flat representation of people, animals, and objects that look only nominally like their real life counterpart. This approach to the visual arts will dominate until the imperial rule of Charlemagne and the accompanying Carolingian Renaissance. Since they are required for each new church, we're going to see some of the main art is going to be illuminated manuscripts. So Hiberno-Saxon art relies on complicated interlaced patterns with complete horror vacui, and the borders of the pages has animals in stylized combat patterns, also known as animal style, not the in and out kind, but the art kind. And before we move on, I wanted to show you guys two pieces that are similar to the piece that we talked about before, the Merovingian loop fibulae. These are two. Well, the one on top is one of the most famous pieces from this time period, and it's called the Sutton Hoo Purse. Sutton Hoo was a Viking ship that was buried, and the person who was buried in this area, they buried everything with him, including his ship. And this was the purse lid. And you can see, if you really look close, this interlace pattern that is very complicated and filled with the garnets and the colored glass. You could see the clasp right here. So this would have been the top of it. So again, this shows the importance of having small, portable materials that you could, carry with you. And then also the importance of it in that it was so valuable, it was buried with the person who had passed. This wasn't found all that long ago, maybe less than 50 years ago, and this is in the British Museum, along with this, which this also looks like a fibulae, but you can also see earrings, a brooch. This looks like another brooch, so we can see similar things that we saw with the last one. So here's kind of this connection between this would have been maybe on the continent of Europe, and this one was found in the northern part of England, which is the link between the Hiberno-Saxon period. Okay, so our next piece is called the Lindisfarne Gospels. And the Lindisfarne Gospels is the top one right here you can see is like the closed book. And then this is what's called the carpet page, the cross carpet page of the Lindisfarne Gospels. And then if I click on it, you could see how detailed it is. I mean, it's just amazing how detailed this is. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it like that actually. So the Lindisfarne is an island off the coast of England, or it's Lindisfarne. And in 635, Christian monks from Scotland built a small monastery in Lindisfarne. This community eventually safeguards the shrine of St. Cuthbert, who was the bishop who died in 687, and his relics were thought to have curative and miracle working powers. Eventually, Lindisfarne is taken over by the Vikings at the end of the 8th century, but the monks were able to save this book and took it to a new location. And this gives us probably the best example of insular Hiberno-Saxon art. This book was written by the Bishop of Lindisfarne. His name was Eadfrith, Eadfrith, and that's around 700. And the book was bound by his successor Ethelwald, and it includes over 250 pages, full page portraits of each evangelist, highly ornamented cross carpet pages, which each feature a large cross, which you can see, but set against a background, and it is full of ornamentation. And then the Gospels themselves, which each introduced by historical initial. It also includes 16 pages of canon tables set in arcades, each correlated with a passage from each evangelist, which allows the reader to compare narrations side by side. Each line of the Latin text also includes the common English translation, thus creating the earliest known Gospels written in a form of English. This makes making this book would have been extremely expensive and a time-consuming process. To make 250 pages, it required 300 calf skins that were then dried out to make the vellum, vellum, pages. And then to get all of the different pigments, they had to be, some of them were indigenous, but a lot of them were imported. Some of them as far away as the Himalayas for the decorations. And then this demonstrates the influence of the migratory metalwork that we have seen on those last two pieces, because it is incorporating this interlaced design. Preliminary drawings would have been made on each page using tools including compasses and straight edges. But it's interesting, it used the strict straight lines that frame images and symmetrical interlacing. However, there's no sense of depth or perspective because the careful interweaving of the lines, and it appears as though as they overlap each other. Gospel books, that's what this is a book that holds the Gospels, are a requirement for each new church. So the books themselves are numerous, and books would have been used in religious ceremonies and displayed on the altar of the church of everybody who had that. And then since they're required for each church, the book is related to the missionary activities of the church. These books are even thought to protect the parishioners from enemies, predators, diseases, and all kinds of misfortunes. These books are produced by monks in workshops that are called scriptoria. The text itself is difficult to read, with the decoration outweighing the utility. The decorations is derived from the barbarian visual traditions that moved from jewelry to illustrated manuscripts. So we have a mix of Roman influences by beginning each gospel written for the four evangelists, which is going to be the next screencast. But each of the gospels, the principal writers, there are four of them. And they are the ones that their names are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And medieval art will usually show a symbol for each of the evangelists in the painted section of the manuscript and the symbol of each author. And for Matthew, we have an angel, sometimes a man. For Mark, we have a lion. Luke is an ox or a calf. And then John is shown by an eagle. So this close-up really shows you also, again, you should see horror vacui and zoomorphic traditions. If you look really closely, you can see snake heads that are kind of interweaving. It looks like they're overlapping, and these are very precious and valuable examples. So this is in the British Library, not the British Museum, which when I went to the British Museum, I assumed that was the same place because, I'm a tourist, and it wasn't, and we didn't get a chance to go see it. But I did see an illuminated manuscript when I was in Ireland, and a lot of the same traditions that is in the Dublin manuscript are very similar to the Lindisfarne Gospels. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let us take pictures of the manuscript in Dublin because of the deterioration, and they didn't want people to take pictures. Okay, so this is the cross carpet page. The next one will be the incipit page of Luke, but I'll also show you guys the other pages of the other three evangelists as well.